Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew, and today I have a special guest, Trevor, who is a platform security engineer with Defnese Unicorns. Trevor, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you for a quick introduction.
Yeah, so my name's Trevor Costanzi. I am a unicorn platform security engineer with Defense Unicorns. Everybody here is a unicorn. It's kind of our tagline there. But in the standard Silicon Valley world, I was a staff security engineer before moving here.
Awesome. Super glad and great to have you on the channel. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our Breaking into Cyber series with the 5 golden questions I ask all my guests. So question 1, could you share your journey into cybersecurity field and what initially sparked your interest in this career?
Yeah, so I don't know how much time everybody has here to watch this video, but it's been a very fun and interesting kind of roller coaster of a career. For me, I actually kind of got my start in cybersecurity when I was pretty young. I was a kid in middle school, actually. It was not too long after I built my first gaming computer, which was roughly in like the 2005-ish area. Also early YouTube, and if you're not familiar with the early era of YouTube, there wasn't a whole lot of moderation. So you could find basically videos that would teach you to do anything.
Yep.
And I kind of just stumbled upon kind of like hacking videos that you could use Google to get into like publicly available security cameras and all sorts of crazy things. And then I started learning how to write like batch scripts in Windows to like kind of prank my friends. I would change their Internet Explorer icon. It would actually be a batch file that spawned a million Internet Explorers, crazy stuff like that. And then, I was a big gamer at the time, so I started hacking video games. I got into kind of exploiting, massively multiplayer games at the time. And not too much longer after that, I started to grow a bit more of a conscience as I got a little bit older, a little bit more mature towards high school, and
trolling surely took its toll. Like, okay, I've had enough fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, it's all fun and games, but there's other people on the other side. But that's kind of how I got into it, that kind of black hat mindset. But
awesome.
Eventually, when I was a junior in high school, actually the summer before my junior and senior year, I actually joined the military, Army Reserve. Unfortunately, I found out in that time period the hard way that I'm allergic to most of the planet. So I didn't stay in the military too long. I was only in the military a little over a year. And then I actually started in kind of the civilian world in the kind of support and help desk space.
Awesome. Well,
So
thank you for your service, definitely still. So still at least
yes.
trying to get in there and going for it. So no, awesome. Keep going. I apologize.
No worries. Yeah. So, and then I was in the kind of the support and help desk space. I was doing kind of high volume support calls for an ISP. Somebody calls in, my internet's not working, that type of thing. I was taking something like 50 to 60 calls a day. And your last call before the end of your shift could take as long as it needed to. So sometimes you'd have a 12-hour shift, and it was crazy, but that type of job actually kind of teaches you a lot, even though you don't really appreciate it at the time. That's kind of how I learned to troubleshoot things.
I was just about to say, when it comes to those help desk, it's ad hoc. It's like, hey, my email doesn't work. Like, okay, well, is your email open? Oh, it wasn't. Okay, well then there you go. Now your email's working. Or hey, I can't get my password in. You don't know what's going to happen until actually you get the call and the user asks like, hey, can you help me do this?
Yeah, you learn to troubleshoot. You kind of learn that game. Troubleshooting is kind of just like this giant game of 20 questions where you're just trying to work your way to the actual source of the problem rather than what the person might think the problem is. And you kind of learn to deal with people and all those sorts of things. So I've still used a lot of those skills I learned in that job today. I worked there for about a year. Then I decided, maybe I should give college a shot. I spent about 3 semesters in college. I actually earned an internship with the networking and telecommunications department at the school. I was originally on their student help desk kind of sort of idea, kind of doing student help desky things. And then I got moved into more like true networking and kind of becoming an expert in wireless networking.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
so that was a really cool experience. But I pretty quickly, by the end of not even the end of my third semester of college, I was kind of at the end of my wallet while also kind of not really enjoying college.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't really, to me, feel like it made sense to keep going. So I kind of took that networking skill set that I had learned as an intern and I turned it into a job as a network engineer for kind of like a reseller and contractor for doing a lot of they did a lot of like Aruba wireless networking
Okay.
equipment and firewalls and switches and routers. So I started, I worked at that job as a network engineer. Really cool job. Got to just kind of get my hands dirty with a lot of different technologies very quickly. Anybody who's worked at like a value added reseller or any type of place like that, like an MSSP, you learn them very quickly because you're
Yes.
just diving deep into a bunch of stuff. It's right into the frying pan. It's crazy. I learned that's where I became a Brocade certified network engineer, which a long time ago, that was a certification that existed. Before Broadcom bought Brocade, which was like a competition to like Cisco and the CCNA, and Juniper, I think, had like the JNCA or JNIC, something like that,
Okay.
which was really cool. And I did some Palo Alto, I did some Brocade networking, I did some Aruba wireless networking. Really cool job. There was a lot of travel though. I did not like traveling so much. So the job just didn't really work out. When you're traveling that much and you're kind of that young, things just don't really work out super well.
There's
But
there's that give
gained a lot
take.
of experience.
There's that give take when it comes to like those travel, because I've seen like a lot of positions like, oh, traveling 25-50% of the time, and like it at most point when people are trying to get in, they're like, yeah, of course I'll travel, and then you get in, like I think some, maybe like I'd say maybe younger generation right now will be like, oh man, traveling's awesome, it's so much fun. But then once you get older and it's like you're always living out of bag, always in a hotel, always having to go jump to like, hey, last minute we need to go somewhere, and like you're on a red eye. And then you get married, then you have kids, and then it's like, hey, well, I need to step away from the family and kind of take completely just put pause on whatever you're doing, or maybe you had a trip planned, and then this a work ad hoc ticket or some type of case happens. Like, it
Yeah,
can
I
slowly
had
take away the
just
fun.
gotten engaged, so it was like just last minute, like go to New York City, and it's like it started to take a toll on me health wise. So just needed to move on from that, and then I started a job that I was at for 5 years. I worked for an international recruiting company that did like lots of specialty recruiting, throughout the globe. But large. They're pretty large in the U.S. I think they were one of the largest internationally as well. Um, I started there as a senior help desk person, um, and I just started working my way up the ladder there. They actually paid pretty well for senior help desk, so I was making good money in help
Nice.
desk, and then I was taking kind of that all that stuff I learned as a network engineer in networking. I was using some of that stuff that I learned from being a support and help desk guy previously. Some of that skills I just had from being a young hacker, and because like I never really let those skills go. I was still using them just kind of like in my free time. So I ended up just working my way up there. I ended up getting kind of a bunch of awards for customer support in the help desk, and I won what was called like the Chairman's Award, which is sort of like your department's employee of the year kind of deal for like
Oh,
the
that's awesome.
corporate office. And then I had a chance to go and meet the CEO and meet the CIO and a bunch of different people. And I was talking at this event to the CIO. I was telling him how I used to hack video games and I was really into cybersecurity. And they were like, one of these days we're going to have a job for you. And lo and behold, not too long after that, they did have a role open that they thought that I would be a really good fit for. So I kind of did like a roundabout into cybersecurity like that, where I ended up taking all of these skills I learned in all of these different jobs and kind of combining them to be like a really good help desk person and putting it to as much use as I could. And then pivoting that into cybersecurity, where my first cybersecurity job was actually to run the vulnerability management program for this large international company.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
And I think that emphasizes when you're, and not to be like ignorant or cocky, but when you're good at your job, like you understand the work, you understand customer service, you understand the processes and the kind of what you're looking at and forward to. It's not you looking for the next role. That next role will find you. And I mean, just like you did for your, like the working up to that position in time of life and even in your career there, your management, like, hey, this person has all their ducks in a row. They understand what we probably need and then some. This would be the perfect fit for this position. So that's outstanding. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was a really great experience the whole way through. I learned so much on the help desk. Even more like a lot of people don't really appreciate, like, especially now when people are trying to get into security, how beautiful help desk is as kind of like a role. I think unfortunately a lot of people really look down on those types of roles where, kind of that idea where at Defense Unicorns we're all unicorns. You should never look down on anybody regardless of what their job is. I kind of view every company, regardless of whether it is, as a flat structure where everybody is just kind of your coworker and you're all doing your own specific job to succeed together. It's really important to help desk people work really hard. They do a very important job. It's very difficult. It can be very stressful, and you learn a ton. I was learning such an insane amount when I was in help desk. That's where I truly learned like how an enterprise IT department worked together. Because in specialized roles, like especially in security, you don't necessarily talk to a lot of people in IT. In help desk, if you want to get a P1 incident or an outage resolved, you're talking to networking, you might be talking to systems engineering, you're talking to the cloud team, and you're really starting to learn how these enterprise businesses work. IT is a business, and to understand how the business work is really critical to being a successful security engineer. And I learned a ton about that, and I built all those relationships. And those relationships were really useful in that first security role that I took on as a vulnerability management person, because, it's not a hugely different gap managing vulnerabilities that it is to trying to get outages resolved. And if you already have those relationships and you understand how the business works, you're calling those same people, like those same people in network engineering or systems or cloud, hey, these are what you need to patch. How can we get it resolved? If you have those relationships, it's not a whole lot different. Sure, you add a couple extra skills. I needed to get way better at Linux. I needed to get a little bit better at scripting. I needed to understand AWS and all these things. But it was a very natural progression for me to go from there to running a vulnerability management program.
Outstanding. Now, are we almost at the point where you jump to Defense Unicorns? I'm kind of curious.
We're not actually that close yet, which is a kind of that roller coaster ride of my career. And, really it only goes up from here, to be honest. But
I was like, that's fantastic. I mean, like we're only halfway there. So, I mean, that's phenomenal. Keep going. I apologize.
Yeah, it would, no problem. I love talking about this stuff because I think it's really useful for a lot of people to hear other people's stories.
100%.
But, I did this for about 2 years. We were still in kind of the era where remote work wasn't terribly common. And this was probably 2019-ish. So remote work wasn't really super common as it is today. And I was kind of working like sort of remotely for this company. Like I had a location, but my whole team was in California. So like they didn't really care if I showed up to the office because it was just like a branch recruitment office. So like none of them are there. So I had moved to Arizona because I had always had an interest in Arizona. And then I pretty immediately, since I moved to Arizona, because I came from kind of like a suburban, rural Pennsylvania area where there weren't that many jobs to choose from. You kind of worked for that big company or that big company, and that was basically it. So I moved to Arizona. I moved to the greater Phoenix area, which is a beautiful place to live. And I pretty quickly got interest from a couple of companies on LinkedIn. By the way, LinkedIn is great for anybody seeking jobs.
Definitely.
Pretty immediately got some interest, and I got like a 50% pay raise offer within, like, I went and I interviewed at this place, and I had an offer within like 3 hours or something, and it was like a 50 or 60% raise or something obscene at the time. And they were like, and they weren't far from my apartment. They were like 5 minutes away down in like Tempe. It was amazing, and this company was really cool. And they were like, "Yeah, you know vulnerability management, you know Rapid7." I was one of the early Rapid7 Insight VM certified administrators.
Okay.
Just
Awesome.
kind of by accident. So like they were like, "We want somebody to do that here." I joined that company, and lo and behold, they didn't actually have a security department before I was there. So all of a sudden, it's like, well, this is what we want you to do, but also you're the guy.
Yeah, we need you to write all this out for us.
So it was like, oh, all right. Well, like I had kind of like experience with the other security programs at my previous role, so it wasn't that far-fetched to be able to do these other things. So I gained, so like this is like small company, they were kind of like a tech startup vibe. And this is where I started to become like way more of a cloud security person and started to carve out that kind of niche for myself. And I spent about 2 years there. I learned so much being kind of the one guy, because when you're the guy, you do literally everything. And most people don't really understand how broad security really is. You've got your compliance, your operations, and even those are like a wide field in and of themselves. And then you've got your engineering, you've got cloud and application security, and all of these crazy different areas that you can work in. And then there's just me, the guy. And, like I think I was hired there, and they were like, "Great, you're here. Actually, we need to do SOC 2 Type 2 within like 2 or 3 months." And I was like, "What?"
Oh, man.
And at the time, I had my only really experience with SOC 2 was kind of like participating in the audit as somebody who like just helped out with like vulnerability management related stuff. But like all of a sudden, I'm running a whole audit as the guy, and that was a pretty neat experience. Because I know a lot of us, like especially in security and in the technical side, we kind of don't love compliance always, but I kind of view it as it's a necessary evil. Not
Definitely.
even necessarily that it's evil, but it's an interesting challenge. I think there's kind of a beautiful puzzle there to be had of how do I solve a compliance problem in the guise of our technical system? Like how do I most efficiently solve this problem without destroying the system and destroying the developer experience? Now, this got me really into the DevSecOps world.
Okay.
Because that's basically how you do it. You need to kind of just automate all these things. And that brought me into another couple of jobs. I did kind of a brief stint at a large company, kind of almost like as a business information security officer, where I was kind of like the lead of security for a specific large business unit within a very large global organization, where I was mostly spending time in spreadsheets at that job.
Ugh, yeah.
And I wasn't getting to be hands-on, and I really enjoyed AWS and doing cloud security from that previous role. So I ended up taking on kind of like a senior cloud security or principal cloud security person role at another large enterprise, which was really cool. This was like kind of the first time I was really getting away from AWS, and I was starting to do a lot of Azure and GCP, which was a really interesting kind of, I had played a little bit with Azure and GCP just kind of on the side because it's, you should always be learning.
Yeah.
But this is when I was like really getting deep into these other cloud platforms to really get hands-on with them. And it was a really interesting job. And I stayed there for probably about a year, but they were just a massive enterprise. So every project took a really long time. There was a lot of red tape. I had joined it because I wanted to build things, and the team was great, the company was great, treated everyone really well, but I just everything happened just a little too slow.
Yeah.
And by a little too slow, I mean like you would like it's hard to explain how being like somebody who had just been at like kind of that startup culture, going to a really, really large company, who's like, wow, I don't have access to anything all of a sudden,
We're gonna
or I
start
only
in
have
quarter.
access to a very small amounts of
We're
things.
gonna start in quarter 1. We're gonna action it in quarter 3, maybe quarter 4. Like that's a long time. But
Yeah, so I went from like one extreme to the other. So like, you'd have these huge project teams and you'd say, well, I really want to change how we do logging here. And then it'd be like, well, here's 3 months of waiting around for PMs and other people and change management and lots of red tape. Um, I'm not a person who loves red tape. That's the DevSecOps person in me. Try to automate away the red tape. I would probably still be there today if I had not been offered a really, really exciting opportunity at the startup that came after that. So I spent about a year there, and then I started at a really exciting AI machine learning startup in Silicon Valley. They were pretty early on in their Series A, and they just had a really good product that was really interesting. I really liked their application of AI and ML, which when you hear AI ML today, you kind of sigh or roll your eyes a little bit because everybody's talking about Chat GPT. But this was before any of the generative AI stuff came out. They were doing really interesting, like OCR and automation for like, loan acceptance and loan originations to help increase the access to loans and make giving loans cheaper for people. So it was a really interesting role. I got to get so insanely hands-on, like I had built out entire CI/CD pipelines to do, static application security testing, source composition analysis and testing, and dynamic application security testing, secret scanning, all this other stuff in CI/CD. I was building cloud infrastructure in Terraform. I was very hands-on, not just as a cloud engineer, a platform engineer, and I was doing all of these insane things. I was writing so much code, and I absolutely loved how technical and how kind of fast-paced being in that environment was. I was still doing a lot of I was still the security guy. This was like back to another the security guy position.
Yep.
But I was really embedded very deep in the product development part of the company. I helped, re-architect a large portion of the product. I was making a lot of big decisions on like, this is how we should build this new product, or this is how we should rebuild it. And these are like the differences we should do to make it more secure. And I was threat modeling, and I had everyone very involved in the process because it was a very small team. It's probably only like 60 people. So I knew everybody. Everybody knew me. We got along very well. So we had that culture going and building all of that kind of awesome stuff together. It was a really amazing job. I was there for 2 years. We built an insane amount of stuff. I wrote a lot of. I probably still, even after leaving, probably like more than 10,000 lines of code.
Oh my gosh.
Are like mine at some point, or maybe 10,000 lines of code in total. Maybe they've been mixed and removed and added. I'm not entirely sure on the exact number, but there was a lot of code that was mine. And I got to work with some of the most just amazing, cutting edge technology, the most amazing like people, an extremely diverse group of people. And, it was a really awesome time to just be there and learn from everyone. Everyone was super humble.
Now, was that in person down in Simi Valley? Or were you still working remote? So was this still like remote?
This is a fully remote startup. This
Awesome.
was like
cool.
This was still kind of the tail end of COVID when I had started, and then kind of the startup was like, no, we're just not going to have an office. Why would we have an office at this point?
Okay.
Everybody works remotely. A lot of people had like during COVID probably left Silicon Valley because of how expensive Silicon Valley was.
And that's what I was
and if you can work
remotely,
remotely, like why would you?
So that's what I was curious about. So,
I still lived in like the greater Phoenix area at the time.
Nice.
And just an amazing opportunity to learn. I was learning right up until the end, doing all sorts of insane stuff with Terraform and automation and CI/CD pipelines, and building all sorts of cool stuff in AWS and GCP and Azure. Really amazing experience. And then I kind of had, an issue with my health, several months, a few months back, or I kind of had to relook at, what was important right now for me and my family. And suddenly I got an email and I met the Defense Unicorns crew, and it was almost immediately like not love at first sight, but like immediately I felt like this was my people.
Nice.
And, a ton of veterans, ex-military, they're doing the innovation and the disruption in that space. And it was just like, these people understand me. And, now I'm a unicorn platform security engineer here at Defense Unicorns, and I'm working on a lot of the same problems where, how do we automate security controls in pipelines and otherwise to meet compliance requirements or to secure applications and to do other things like that.
That is phenomenal. And might I say, quite the resume background of kind of like your from start to where you're at now. And I mean, I'd say with the amount of knowledge and stuff you gotten to do, like everything from help desk to pretty much managing a vulnerability team and going through an AI startup, and AI being such a hot topic to you right now too, it's phenomenal. And we'll get to that question because it's actually going to be, I think, a little bit further down for the learning development aspect of it. But that's outstanding and to me very cool. Like, everyone tells you once you get into cyber, you're going to be continuously learning. It's something, things change every year, every 6 months. It almost seems nowadays. So, I mean, that's great. To me, that's outstanding. Round of applause, man, because that's phenomenal for that kind of background. And also, I'd say to retain it and use it all and to continuously, like, hey, I've used everything from like when I've started at help desk to basic communication and to your like service through a project, up until like, hey, doing SOC 2 work on doing the audits and compliance, and now going back into the code and now kind of taking everything and putting it together as a platform engineer, a platform security engineer. Yeah, that's great. Dreams, #dreams. So no, cool. So we're moving to question 2. What does a typical day look like in your role, and what are some of the most challenging aspects of your job in cybersecurity?
Yeah, well, I'm relatively new to the team. It's probably like my fourth week, third week, fourth week, somewhere along those lines at the Defense Unicorn. So I don't necessarily have an average day, but like just generally as a platform security engineer, or if you're doing like that kind of work, it really depends. You're working much more directly as like an agile team or part of the product and application development teams. So your week might change depending on what you're doing. And if you're the security guy, things might get even weirder because you might be back and forth between talking to clients, doing, security questionnaires, or you might be writing code. For me, a lot of the times I was solving problems. Depending on the week, I could be solving, how do we automate IAM in AWS for deployments to production safely and securely. I might have been writing different IAM groups, policies, and service control policies in AWS, and this whole web of Terraform to make it work together so that we could continually like push the boundaries of security and continue to upgrade the environment. I wrote security tools in Go sometimes. Or Go or Python, depending on the time. I prefer Go these days.
Okay.
But Python is a perfectly reasonable thing to write code in or write tools in. Sometimes I would do offensive security testing just to kind of validate security controls or anything like that. I do code reviews. I think code reviews are really important. A hard thing to learn to do properly, but very important. It can honestly can really depend. You could be doing architecture, you could be doing threat modeling, even in platform security and kind of DevSecOps. The space in and of itself is still fairly wide. So there's a lot of stuff to do there. A little bit of CI/CD, a little bit of coding, a little bit of Terraform and cloud and Kubernetes, and you still got to do the IAM, and there's still that knowledge of compliance frameworks that you can automate those compliance needs in either pipelines or through other security controls. So it depends on the day.
Very, very ad hoc sometimes too, just depending on the task. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're constantly learning. You're constantly doing something you've maybe never done. So it's definitely sometimes I feel like, I get like huge imposter syndrome sometimes, but it's just because I'm doing something I've never done, but I've already done so many other different things. So I can leverage kind of what I've already learned to learn these new things. And it's a very rewarding kind of role because I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, especially if you're kind of in a large enterprise, you might get kind of stuck in a specific security niche where all you're doing is vault scanning, or all you're doing is very specific risk things, or you just work in SOC and you just do SIM stuff all day, or you might be a security engineer who just does SIM stuff all day. Like, and for me, that's like, I love getting to do a lot of things. I have ADHD. A little bit of background in me, and kind of being able to do a lot of things keeps the job from being kind of mundane or boring, and it makes it really rewarding for me to be able to learn and do all these different things as part of my job.
Yeah, I challenge a lot of my coworkers, both my seniors, my we just have a few new interns that started today, and then even some of our junior analysts. Like, try to challenge yourself and do something new every day. And I work with a sim, I work with a case, I'm in a case queue, so it's very much sometimes can be a very mundane process. I get in, I check my emails, I look at the queue, I wait for a case, I work the case. Oh, it's a case I haven't seen before. Now I'm a little perky because I'm like, ooh, I haven't done this before. It's something that's going to try hopefully challenge me. So, I mean, I constantly try to grab, or if it's something new that I haven't seen before, I'll reach out to my team. Hey, have you guys seen this before? Oh, you haven't? Hey, I want to show you this because I just figured this out. And that way, one, it's a mix between showing my team and kind of sharing the information and knowledge, to where if they ever come across this problem, I can now say, hey, look, now we've all done this, so we can all now be little junior SMEs as we become better and better at this process. And two, I just like to talk. I'm a chatty Cathy. I'm an extroverted IT guy. So I'm the outside norm of what normal IT folks are. With some of my team are very much recluses. They like to keep to themselves and quiet. But as soon as my Tigger personality comes in, they're like, Andy's gonna want to talk. But it's a good conversation. It always something hopefully positive to come out of it. So no, that is also, I think, very much true when it comes to ad hoc work and just always being challenged and doing the next thing to challenge yourself, to kind of keeping yourself up to date with times and different challenges that any kind of company is going to give you. So awesome. Moving to question 3. For someone looking to start a career in cybersecurity in 2024, what are the skills and qualifications that you would recommend to focus on or acquire?
Well, I think the first thing somebody should do if they're potentially looking into getting into cybersecurity, and this is what I tell everybody. I do a lot of mentoring, and I talk to a lot of people who are interested. The first thing you need to do before you decide to get any skills at all is really look at cybersecurity as a field. It's so broad. There's so many specializations. Even a lot of those specializations can be pretty broad. Figure out first what you want to do. What you want to do 10 years down the line. You want to be a senior penetration tester. You want to be, an application security guy. You want to be, cloud security. You want to be you just want to work in a SOC. You want to do incident response. Whatever your goal is, if I don't know your destination, I can't give you directions.
Definitely.
I could tell you to go to, Pennsylvania, but if you don't know where in Pennsylvania you want to go, you could end up anywhere.
I was
There's
just
a
in
lot of
Pennsylvania.
options.
That is a true statement.
Exactly. I mean, you could be in Pittsburgh, you can be in Philly, you can be in Scranton, you can be in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, you can. And there are a lot of just empty dirt fields and like farms out there. And yeah,
I grew up surrounded by those farms and the Amish, and it's a beautiful state, but there's a whole lot of places you can be and a whole lot of nowhere you can be. So, it really depends what you want to do. The first thing you have to do is figure out, like, what do you actually want to do? If you can, find your local cybersecurity meetups, attend them, do some networking, meet people. I host or co-host or assistant to the regional manager, host, a meetup here locally in the Valley. I attend a number of other meetups here locally in the Valley. I talk at a number of meetups and events here locally in the Valley where I share my own knowledge. Go to these things, speak to people, watch their talks, figure out if that's an actual thing you want to do. If you can, like if you're in college or something, see if you can or if you just have a job, like if you're help desk or something, a huge thing that I would have done, I did for people was like, come shadow me for a day.
Yeah.
Get to understand what the role does if it's something you're actually interested in. A lot of people are like, I want to be a pen tester, but then they figure out pen testers do a whole lot of not pen testing. They do a pen test, and then it's like writing a report for 40 hours.
Yep.
Because in reality, a lot of times what companies are paying for is not the pen test itself, but the report, because the report's what they need for, whatever compliance, check the box procedure, whatever. Like,
Audit.
and many companies do not fund a full pen test to be like very useful.
Yeah.
Not that a rudimentary pen test isn't useful, or a 40-hour pen test or an 80-hour pen test isn't useful, but a lot of them aren't all that interesting, and you end up doing the same thing over and over again. And again, you're in a niche, and for me, that's boring. For you, that might be a really interesting job. So kind of figure out what you want to do. Do not shy away from help desk. I think help desk is an amazing place to start.
Agreed.
But again, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to get into certain roles, I think help desk is an amazing place to start. If you want to get into certain other roles, I think help desk is still a great place to start, but maybe software engineer is a better place to start. Like if you want to get more towards like application security or like DevSecOps, there's a lot of code involved. Starting as a software engineer is probably a little bit better. Even like if you want to be a pen tester, sometimes even starting as a software engineer might be the best option, because who better to test web applications than somebody who used to build web applications? Like, right? Like I don't really like the term entry level for any security role, because I think even what we typically consider early career security roles benefit a lot from kind of previous tech experience. So I always try to tell somebody, if you want to maximize kind of your long-term success and be kind of the best person you can be, best professional in cybersecurity you can, it's fine and it's amazing to start in other technical roles. For a lot of people, that'll be like 2 to 5 years in professional experience, and for some people, maybe less, maybe more. Some people may never end up there. Tons of people, they go and they get a bachelor's in cybersecurity, and then they go and get a master's in cybersecurity. They haven't worked in any job, and then they're like, why won't anyone hire me? And it's like, well, unfortunately, in a lot of those programs, you don't learn to secure your seatbelt. So I can't really trust you to secure large, complex enterprise environments. And it's not to like gatekeep anyone. I would love to get more people in the field. It's just that the field is hard. It's a hard job. We have a lot of responsibility, both technically and ethically and morally. We're securing people's data most of the time.
Yep.
It's pretty complicated. So, figure out where you want to go. Don't be afraid to spend a few years not in cybersecurity and work your way into it. Like me, I worked from help desk, and then I moved kind of laterally into the role. I think a lot of people do that, whether it's help desk or something else. But that's a really great way to get into the field, because if you start in like a SOC analyst role, you're going to miss a lot of experience you would have gotten in like a help desk role or a software role or something else. So beautiful thing to learn. I don't feel the need to go to college. I dropped out of college. I'm not ashamed to say that. I love that about myself personally. Don't feel bad if you did go to college either, to be honest. Everybody learns differently, but I think one of the nice things about the past several years is, companies are starting to learn if you want really good cybersecurity people, you might need to, a lot of us have a really atypical skill set than what you might normally see. You might not see a lot of certifications. You might see a lot of certifications, and, just learn your own way. Certifications aren't terrible, but a lot of them are very theoretical, as you probably know. If you've done a lot of certs, like you're kind of studying for a test rather than learning to be a cybersecurity professional.
It's like one of my previous videos, and I talked about exam topics, because it's just like you can memorize a test and you can memorize the questions, but then when it comes to real life application of a process, so like a DDoS or a man in the middle, like the answer is B because you studied it on the test and that's what you know. But now can you explain to me how to remediate it, or how now to handle that in a working environment? And I think it's also another thing you said too with help desk, like simple things I learned, because I worked help desk for about 2.5 years at a company called Facil, which I don't think it exists anymore. And it was a third-party contract that worked for DOHS. Like I said, just resetting passwords. And I worked there for about 2.5 years. I did 6 months, 8 months-ish as help desk, and then they moved me to their outage coordinator team. And I learned even more. And then I pivoted to PD, did that for about 7 years, learned some great communication, analytical mindset. I left as a detective, still been in the military and joined a cyber protection team, and then full circle went back and getting into cyber IT. A mix between just being able to think about my help desk days, knowing how to talk to people and how to network, and then having it's a mix between a standardized and systematic mindset of a process I want to handle, or just even having to go ad hoc. It would let me work certain processes and kind of readjust how I had to think and describe and kind of paint a story. One of just simply getting the 5 W's on anything. And whether that was working a case, and I used the correlation of like when I was a police officer, my victim was whoever called me to help. And now at my company I work at now, my victim is my company. The company is always the victim. So that's who I always have to, in a sense, worry or care about. And I still have to provide my 5 W's. Hey, who, what, when, why, where? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Can we remediate this? Okay, is it malicious? Is it not malicious? Is this something we can tune? Is this something that we need to send up to an escalated team? Is this something we have to reach out to and explain to patching, vulnerability, some type of engineering team that's trying to run some specific code through Terraform or Java that's getting blocked by your EDR? Is there business impact? And it's, like you said, knowing who to reach out to and talk to and communicate those issues, whether at a high technical level or hey, you're running this code and it's being stopped. Okay, well, let's fix that. And then we get an exclusion in or so on and so forth. So yeah, you're spot on the money. And once again, same thing with certifications. I have colleagues that are tiers above me that hold no certifications, a GED, but they have tons and tons of knowledge and just understand coding languages, processes, and how to work and kind of like dissect a case, anything that comes through, or even having to write up or go through an exclusion. I also have folks that have like the whole SANS master's course certifications where it comes like 2,500, get like the 25 certs with all the cool circles, which is great because they both come hand in hand when talking to those people, because you're also getting 2 different kind of mindsets and kind of an avenue to attack it. You have that technical book of it, but then you also have just, I'll call it like the street smarts of just like, hey, I've been doing this for 10 years. This is how I know this is going on, and then they can explain it. So, no, spot on.
Yeah, it's that really interesting kind of like dichotomy of like, because there's not any one way into cybersecurity, you end up kind of automatically, by the just nature of how it works, you end up with a team of people who have very diverse backgrounds and very different ways of looking at things, and everyone ends up kind of balancing it out, because you'll have one dude who is in help desk and one dude who is a network engineer and one dude who is a software engineer, and all those skill sets really mesh well together when you're a cybersecurity team.
I used an analogy recently on a LinkedIn post. I said, I'm like cybersecurity is like making a baseball team. If all you have is catchers and pitchers and you come across a team that has one of every position, you're probably not going to beat that team and they're going to defeat you, because all you can do is pitch and catch. And it's a silly analogy, but if you think about it, like if you look at a baseball team, and just like you said, like if you have a well-diverse team of like, hey, a cloud, EDR, an analyst, a help desk, networking, AI, any of those, and you'll put them all together on a team, like you have all those different kind of avenues now kind of cross-covered, and then you can cross-train, you can help teach, and you get to share that knowledge. And it strengthens you as a whole, rather than like, hey, we have all these people that have master's and degrees with 5 certifications, but they're fresh out of college, but they have 2 years of experience each. Like, okay, we're probably going to miss some things still just because they maybe understand the technical book aspect of how something works compared to actually seeing it in the wild. Compared to you have a guy that's been in a role for 10 years, maybe has an associate's, maybe has a GED, but's been doing that, been in the environment, knows the network, knows the teams, understands basic attack frame network, and understands MITRE and how to navigate that, and has worked with audit, has done a SOC 2 evaluation with compliance, and oh, hey, this is why we need to do this, and here's how I can explain why. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a weird amount that you don't learn in a lab. You learn in a lab, everything's how it should be.
Yep.
And that word should will come up a lot, and it will start to piss you off at some point. And no matter what you do in tech, you will hear a lot of that shouldn't be possible, or it shouldn't do that.
I didn't know
or
that
you shouldn't do that. But then you get woken up at 2 a.m. and all of a sudden shouldn't doesn't matter because it did happen. And you
Indeed.
learn so much more at 2 a.m. trying to unfuck something. Sorry, YouTube. You might have to
We should
bleep
be.
that one out,
We'll figure
but
it out. We should be okay.
then you will succeeding all the time. We learn the most from our failures. So again, another important thing for new people to learn is be comfortable being uncomfortable. Be comfortable with failure.
Definitely.
If we always learn the most from our failures, so bump your head into the wall, figure out the problem, fail a bunch of times, and when you figure out, you will never forget what it is that happened and what you figured out. And be comfortable being uncomfortable. Kind of like, don't let people make you uncomfortable at work, but like be willing to take on things that you're not super familiar with. Be willing to do projects that keep you on the edge of your skill set.
Definitely.
That's how we grow. And even if you mess up once or twice or you have some issues, people will be there to help you. The community is there to help you. Your team's probably there to help you. There's resources. We have Google. We have ChatGPT now or generative AI. So, get comfortable learning new things because stuff changes super fast.
And that's a great pivot to the next question: is learning and development. How do you keep up with the rapidly evolving landscape of cybersecurity threats and technologies? And are there any specific resources or practices that you find invaluable?
Yeah. So obviously, what I think is really important is getting involved in your local cybersecurity community if you can. I think we're both members of DC480, the
Yep.
local Defcon group.
Shout out.
I'm a part. Yeah, shout out. I'm a part of Phoenix 2600. I host a co-host or assistant to the regional manager host EVSec in the East Valley. So getting involved with the community, learning from each other, getting an understanding of what else is out there, what other threats people are seeing, how other people are solving problems, is really important to me. That's how I kind of keep abreast of what's going on in the industry. I think it's really important to always be learning somehow. Now, you don't always have to be doing a new cert. Again, certs I don't think are the most important thing, especially as you kind of get past that filter in HR.
Yeah.
But find a way to learn and find a way that works for you to learn. I have ADHD. It's really hard for me to sit down and just study a multiple choice test. I can't do a book. I can't just do a PDF. I need a video course. I need some labs. I need a problem to solve. So for me, like, when I presented a couple months ago at the Cloud Security Alliance Southwest Summit about serverless for security engineers. And for that, I wrote a whole bunch of Go code. And that was like a representation of a new tool that I was building at the time. And I chose to write it in Go because I wanted to learn Go because I thought Go is a really great language for security engineers to use. So I thought, if you can find excuses in your day-to-day job to learn new things and practically apply them, that's an amazing way to learn because, you do a course and then, you have that thing that's like tutorial hell. You've done the tutorials a bunch of times, but, actually solving a problem is like the best way to, learn and retain information. So yeah, like just try to find what works for you. What works for me isn't going to work for everybody. So it's not really a one size fits all for that, but try to find stuff that's practical, that applies to what you're doing. Don't feel like you need to learn security stuff. I think honestly, a lot of the best security training isn't security training. It's AWS training or Azure training or GCP training or Linux training. All of those kind of things that you need to know in order to secure them are really important.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, last question, then I'll maybe throw one or two ad hoc questions at you. Inspirational figures. So, who are your role models in cybersecurity industry or related fields, and how have they influenced you in your approach to your career?
Ooh, inspirational figures. I don't know that I have particular inspirational figures in the industry, to be honest. I think there are definitely people that I've appreciated over the years. Like I don't, I'm going to butcher his name, but Nicholas Shylin or Shalon. He was the first chief DevSecOps person of the Air Force, chief software officer, I think. And he was like the DevSecOps guy for the DoD. He helped set out a lot of the original DoD DevSecOps stuff. So, I first started following him, I think, like on LinkedIn or something back in like I think probably 2019-ish. And he got me into that, kind of got me into DevSecOps. It helped me get interested in like Kubernetes and all of those types of ways to solve, DevSecOps and security problems at scale for applications. I don't know that there are that many great influences in security, unfortunately. I think a lot of people are like, yeah, look, I hacked everything. Cool, I guess.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. I've actually found a lot of my greatest influences have been people I've been mentoring. I've mentored some people who have become successful in the industry, and that's a great inspiration for me to keep going and keep mentoring people. Just kind of keep giving back to the community. I guess another person I kind of appreciate, Lester Godsey, Maricopa County CISO. He's a really interesting person if you've ever talked to him. He solves a lot of interesting problems in government for cybersecurity. Mike Manrod, CISO of Grand Canyon University and Grand Canyon Education, solves a lot of interesting problems in that type of environment. It's always interesting to talk to these people and get to know them and understanding how they solve problems, because you can kind of take that perspective and see how it applies to you, or bounce ideas off of that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think you make a good point too, and it's like mentoring and being a mentor, and also just getting to kind of meet, like Ryan Murray's also, he was I think a fill-in
Yes.
for state of Arizona for a CISO. I think they recently just filled the role, but Ryan, to me, he's handling so many different things when it comes to even like the K through 12 aspects when it comes to cybersecurity and across the entire state. Bringing together their grant program, which I was a part of back before I went over to my other current position at work, at my financial institution. But I mean, it's so fun and interesting to see your we'll call them pupils, we'll call them mentees, grow and just learn and figure things out on their own, and like find a position they want, or solve a problem on their own. And it's fun. And I think that's one reason why I think teaching and learning and giving back with this whole series of Breaking into Cyber, it took me probably hearing it by 5 different people of like, hey, you should get into cybersecurity. Hey, you should get into cybersecurity. And then me asking like 5 different people, hey, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And hearing it from the right person sometimes is what it takes to get people that kind of push to get in, or finally like make that hop or leap, or do a career change, or finally take that cert, or finally apply for those positions they didn't think they're qualified to be in, to start practicing for those interview questions, to start actually doing interviews, to actually going and accepting a job, whether that's in state or out of state. And that's why I think it's very important. And I really appreciate you too, Trevor, coming on to the channel and kind of sharing your whole story and this whole process, and your outlook and insight for all these kind of solutions of kind of what it is to be in cybersecurity, how you can learn, different ways you can learn, being a mentor, being a mentee, the process and kind of ways that you got to where you are today is not always the same as everyone else. You don't have to go to a four-year college. You don't have to go get 10,000 certifications. You can start at help desk. You can move to an engineer role. You can go to college and you can get into an engineer role. You can not go to college and get into an engineer role. It's something that I think, at least now, definitely in 2024, just like you said, I think companies are finally starting to get away from the HR requirement. And I always call it like the HR obstacle course. Like you have to get through the HR algorithm sometimes to get and talk to a hiring manager that, hey, look, this person doesn't have a degree, but have you looked at their resume and have you seen the projects they're doing? They have a home lab. They've done this stuff. They have a GitHub repository. They've done they've done project ABCD. They've made an app. They've written code to solve this solution and this problem. So it's 100% kind of like nail on the head. And so with that is the final question I have for you. And then I have, I guess, one ad hoc question is, I see that beautiful monitor behind you. Is there any good games right now that are eating into your taking time away from the day every now and then that you'll plug into and kind of relax on?
So funnily enough, that's actually my work monitor.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
It is an amazing Samsung G9 49-inch or Odyssey or whatever, ultra wide. I'm currently playing on an Alienware ultra wide.
Just as awesome.
Another awesome monitor, not quite as wide because that one's 49 inches. This one's 34, which I think is a little bit better for gaming because too long and then you got to turn your head and stuff.
Yep.
So I've been enjoying Helldivers. I've always been a bit of a World of Warcraft player, so I always kind of jam out on that a little bit.
I hope I
I
know
kind of
this
have a lot
answer.
of stuff.
Horde or Alliance?
Kind of both by
Okay,
proxy. In my heart, I'm more of an Alliance person because Ironforge is kind of personally my homeland. But most of my friends always end up on Horde, so it's like
That's the same for mine.
you
All my
kind
friends
of
only
have to
Horde,
play
so-
Horde whether you like it or not.
Definitely.
And that's just kind of how it is. Yeah, I would play a whole lot of games. My Steam list is shamefully large, probably.
Outstanding.
There was enough Steam sales where you buy like 30 games for $20 where you're like, oh God, there's so many games I can't play.
It's like a library, right? Like I want a large plethora, so when I come in, I can choose what I want. Like, oh, today I feel like doing Helldivers. Or you know what? Let's spin up the World of Warcraft Blizzard account and see what chaos I can cause. Well, Trevor, I really appreciate your time. You will be getting one of my new Ginger Hacker shirts as a huge thank you for coming onto the channel and getting to share your story and insight. Any final words or advice for anyone else, just top of your head or kind of ad hoc, they'd like to kind of shout out to anybody for?
If you're going through hell, keep going. Yes, it's hard to get in cybersecurity. Yes, the job market is tough right now. Look for something. Don't feel bad if it's not a cybersecurity role. It's better to get some experience than none. And those jobs are amazing. Just be in tech, have a job, do great stuff, learn some more stuff. It'll put you in the right direction. And the world kind of has a way of working itself out. We all get to where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to get there. It's not a race.
Awesome. Well, hey everyone, thank you for staying this long and kind of checking out this channel. If you really enjoyed this chat, please like, subscribe, drop a comment, tell me what your favorite part was, and as always, keep hacking.